My son Marcus called it a safety concern. He said my reflexes weren't what they used to be, that the medications I took for my blood pressure made me drowsy, that at 68 years old, I was a danger to myself and others on the road. He was so convincing, so caring, so insistent that I finally handed over the keys to my 2019 Toyota Camry, the car I'd bought with my own money after working 30 years as a school librarian. I trusted him completely. That trust shattered the day I walked past First National Bank and saw my car parked in their lot with a loan officer's business card tucked under the wiper blade. When I confronted the officer, she showed me documents proving Marcus had used my vehicle as collateral for a $35,000 loan, forging my signature on papers that gave him legal claim to my property. The woman who had once helped me get a scholarship to nursing school. My former neighbor's daughter, who I'd mentored through her darkest days, had become a federal prosecutor. No one knew she owed me everything. When she arrived at Marcus's office with a team of investigators, she said only 5 words that made my son's face go white. "Hello, Marcus. Remember me, Rachel?" Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Dorothy Chan, and I never imagined I would spend my retirement fighting my own son for the right to keep my independence. At 68 years old with arthritis in my knees and reading glasses perpetually perched on my nose, I had planned to spend these years volunteering at the library where I'd worked for 3 decades, taking care of my garden, and maybe finally learning to paint watercolors like I'd always dreamed. Instead, I found myself standing in the lobby of First National Bank, staring at my own car through the plate glass windows, trying to understand why it was parked in a spot reserved for loan collateral vehicles. The morning had started normally enough. I'd woken at 6:30, made my usual cup of green tea, and settled into my reading chair with a novel I'd been saving for a quiet morning. It was a Tuesday in October, and the maple tree outside my window had turned that particular shade of gold that always reminded me of my late husband David's eyes. He'd been gone for 5 years now, and sometimes the missing him hit me so hard I could barely breathe. But that morning, I was feeling peaceful, content even. My pension was modest, but sufficient. My small ranch house was paid off, and I had my health more or less. The only shadow on my otherwise pleasant life was the situation with my car. 3 months ago, Marcus had started his campaign to get me to stop driving. It began subtly enough. A comment here and there about how I'd taken a turn a bit wide, how I seemed to brake suddenly, how perhaps the night vision wasn't what it used to be. First, I'd laughed it off. I was a careful driver, had been for 50 years. I'd never had an accident, never gotten a ticket, never even had a close call worth mentioning. But Marcus persisted. He brought statistics about elderly drivers and accident rates. He showed me articles about medication side effects and reaction times. He painted such a vivid picture of the danger I supposedly pose that I started to doubt myself. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was becoming a hazard without realizing it. Maybe the responsible thing, the loving thing to do as a mother and a member of society was to give up my independence before something terrible happened. The final push came after a family dinner at his house. Marcus lived in a beautiful colonial in the suburbs, the kind of house I'd always dreamed of giving him when he was growing up. His wife Jessica had made pot roast and we'd eaten together, their 2 children chattering about school while I tried to pretend everything was normal. After dinner, Marcus had taken me aside, his face arranged in that expression of gentle concern that I now recognized as manipulation. "Mom," he'd said, taking my hands in his. "I've been thinking a lot about your safety, about what would happen if something went wrong while you were driving. I couldn't live with myself if you hurt someone, or worse, if you got hurt. I love you too much to let that happen. Please, just let me take the car for now. You can use ride-share apps. I'll set everything up for you. I'll even pay for your rides. This isn't about taking away your freedom. This is about keeping you safe." Looking back, I can see how carefully he'd crafted his words. How he'd made it sound like love instead of theft. How he'd positioned himself as the caring son instead of the manipulator he'd become, but at the time worn down by months of his pressure and genuinely worried that maybe I was becoming a danger, I'd agreed. I'd handed over my keys, my registration, my insurance papers, everything Marcus said he needed to take care of the car while I adjusted to my new transportation situation. That was 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks of feeling trapped in my own home, dependent on others for every trip to the grocery store, every doctor's appointment, every simple errand. Marcus had indeed set up rid share accounts for me, but he'd also set them up to notify him every time I used them. He knew where I went, when I went, how much I spent. My independence hadn't just been curtailed. It had been completely eliminated. I tried talking to him about getting the car back. I pointed out that I felt fine, that my doctor had no concerns about my driving ability, that the isolation was affecting my mental health. But Marcus had an answer for everything. The doctor was just being nice. I was experiencing denial, a common response in elderly people facing cognitive decline. The isolation was temporary, just until I adjusted to my new lifestyle. He made me feel like I was being unreasonable, even selfish, for wanting my own vehicle back. Then came this Tuesday morning. I'd needed to go to the bank to deposit a small check for my pension fund, something that had arrived late. The ride-share would have cost $15 each way, $30 total for what should have been a 10-minute errand. I decided to walk instead. It was only a mile and a half. The weather was beautiful, and the exercise would do me good. I'd bundled up against the autumn chill, grabbed my walking stick, and set out. The walk had taken me 40 minutes, longer than I'd expected, and by the time I reached the bank, my knees were aching. But I'd felt triumphant, too. I'd proven to myself that I wasn't helpless, that I could still manage my own affairs, that Marcus' concerns were overblown. I'd climbed the steps to the bank's entrance, pushed through the heavy glass doors, and that's when I saw it. My car. My silver Toyota Camry with the small dent in the rear bumper from when I'd backed into a shopping cart at the grocery store. My car with the Library Association sticker in the back window. My car with the exact license plate number I'd memorized over the past 3 years of ownership. It was sitting in the lot visible through the bank's windows. Parked in a spot marked with a sign that read reserved for collateral vehicles only. First, I thought I was mistaken. Maybe it just looked like my car. Maybe Marcus had parked it there while running an errand of his own. But as I stood there staring, a bank employee approached me. A young woman with a professional smile and a name tag that read Jennifer Martinez, loan officer. "Can I help you find something, ma'am?" she asked. I pointed at the car with a shaking hand. "That's my vehicle. Why is it parked in that spot?" Jennifer's smile faltered slightly. "You're here about the collateral loan? Let me check my files. What's the account name?" "I don't have an account. That's my car. I didn't authorize anyone to use it as collateral for anything." The smile disappeared completely. "Ma'am, maybe we should step into my office." The next 30 minutes were among the most surreal of my life. Jennifer pulled up files on her computer, showing me documents I'd never seen before. Loan applications, asset verification forms, title transfer paperwork, and there on every single page was a signature that looked exactly like mine, but that I knew I'd never written. Marcus had forged my name. My son had committed fraud, using my property to secure a loan for $35,000. "Mrs. Chan," Jennifer said carefully, her professional composure cracking slightly. "These documents appear to be in order. The signatures match what we have on file from your previous accounts with us. The notary stamps are legitimate. If you're saying you didn't sign these, that's a very serious allegation. I'm saying I didn't sign them because I didn't." I stared at the screen at my own name written in handwriting that was close to mine but not quite right. The loops were wrong. The pressure was different, but it was good enough to fool someone who didn't know my signature intimately. I haven't driven that car in 6 weeks. My son told me to stop driving for safety reasons. He said he would take care of the vehicle for me. I didn't know he meant he would steal it. Jennifer's face went pale. "Mrs. Chan, if what you're saying is true, this is fraud, identity theft, forgery. You need to contact the police immediately." But I couldn't move. I sat in that uncomfortable chair in Jennifer's office, staring at the papers that proved my son had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. And I felt something inside me break. This wasn't about the car anymore. This was about trust. About the relationship between a mother and child, about the man I'd raised, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, using that love and trust as a weapon against me. Marcus had been such a good child, smart, ambitious, always pushing himself to achieve more. I'd worked extra hours at the library to pay for his college applications. Had taken out loans to cover what his scholarships didn't. When he'd gotten into business school, I'd been so proud. When he'd landed his first job at a financial consulting firm, I'd framed his business card and hung it on my refrigerator. When he'd married Jessica and bought that beautiful house, I thought I'd done everything right as a mother. I'd raised a successful, happy man. Now I had to face the possibility that I'd raised a thief. Mrs. Chun, Jennifer said gently, "I know this is difficult, but you need to make some decisions. If you want to dispute these documents, if you want to claim fraud, we'll need to involve law enforcement. The bank will cooperate fully with any investigation. But I need to warn you, this could get very complicated. Family disputes involving financial fraud often do." "I need to think," I whispered. "I need to understand what's happening before I make any accusations." "I understand." Jennifer printed out copies of all the documents and slid them into a folder. "Take these." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So, if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Review them. Talk to a lawyer if you need to. But, Mrs. Chun, I'm going to be honest with you. In my experience, when family members forge signatures on financial documents, it's rarely an isolated incident. If your son did this with your car, he might have done it with other assets, too. The word sent ice through my veins. Other assets, my house, my pension accounts, my small investment portfolio that David had left me. Had Marcus touched those too? How far did this betrayal go? I stumbled out of the bank, clutching the folder of documents like a lifeline. The walk home took even longer than the walk there. Partly because my knees hurt worse now, but mostly because my mind was spinning in circles. I needed to confront Marcus. But I also needed proof. I needed to understand the full scope of what he'd done before I made any moves that might alert him. When I finally reached my house, exhausted and emotionally drained, I found my neighbor Angela sitting on my front porch steps. Angela Rodriguez had lived next door for 15 years. Ever since she bought the house as a young single mother struggling to make ends meet, I'd helped her then, watching her daughter Rachel after school when Angela couldn't afford childcare, helping Rachel with her homework, encouraging her to apply for scholarships when college seemed financially impossible. Rachel had gone on to study pre-law, then law school, and last I'd heard, she'd become some kind of prosecutor in the city. I'd lost touch with them both after David died. Too wrapped up in my own grief to maintain friendships the way I should have. "Dorothy," Angela called out when she saw me approaching. "I've been trying to reach you. Your phone kept going to voicemail." I pulled out my cell phone and realized I'd had it on silent mode all morning. 3 missed calls from Angela, 2 from Marcus. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I'm sorry. I went for a walk. Got distracted." I climbed the steps slowly, my knees screaming in protest. "Is everything all right?" Angela's face was serious. "That depends. Dorothy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Did you co-sign a business loan for Marcus?" The folder of documents nearly slipped from my hands. "What? No. Why would you ask that?" "Because Rachel called me this morning. She's handling a case involving business fraud, and your name came up in some documents her office is reviewing. She wanted to know if you were aware that you're listed as a co-signer and guarantor on a substantial business loan. She said, if you didn't know about it, you might want to get legal advice immediately." I felt the world tilt sideways, not just my car. Then Marcus had used my name, my credit, my entire financial identity for who knows what purposes. The caring son, who'd been so worried about my safety, had been systematically stealing my assets while convincing me I was too incompetent to manage my own life. "I need to sit down," I said faintly. Angela helped me into the house and into my reading chair. She made tea while I sat there trying to process everything. When she came back with 2 steaming mugs, she sat across from me and waited, patient as always. "Tell me everything," she said finally. So, I did. I told her about Marcus's campaign to get me to stop driving, about handing over my car keys and registration, about the documents at the bank showing my forged signature, about the loan I'd apparently co-signed without knowing it. By the time I finished, Angela's face had gone from concerned to furious. "That son of a bitch," she said quietly. "I'm sorry, Dorothy. I know he's your son, but that's elder abuse. That's financial exploitation. That's criminal fraud. I know I whispered, but he's my son, Angela. How do I report my own child to the police?" "The same way any victim reports their abuser. By telling the truth." Angela pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Rachel. She needs to hear this directly from you. If there's a case being built around financial fraud and your name is involved, you need to be part of the investigation, not a potential target of it." Target. The word sent panic through me. Could I be held responsible for loans I didn't sign for? If they can prove you didn't sign for them? No. But if Marcus has been careful, if the forgeries are good enough, you might have to fight to prove your innocence. That's why you need Rachel. She's good at her job, Dorothy. She's one of the best prosecutors in the state. And she's never forgotten what you did for her. I remembered Rachel as a serious child, always reading, always asking questions. I'd loved having her in my house after school. Loved watching her devour the books I'd recommend. Loved seeing her mind work through complex problems. When she'd gotten her scholarship to college, I'd been almost as proud as if she'd been my own daughter. But that was 20 years ago. The little girl I'd mentored had grown into a woman I barely knew. Angela was already dialing. The phone rang twice before a professional voice answered. "Rachel Rodriguez." "Rachel, it's Mom. I'm at Dorothy Chan's house. You need to hear what she has to say." There was a pause. "Then put her on." Angela handed me the phone. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. "Rachel, it's Mrs. Chan." "Dorothy, I don't know if you remember me." The voice that came through the phone was warm despite its professional tone. "Mrs. Chan, I remember everything you did for me. Every book you shared, every scholarship application you helped me fill out, every time you told me I could be more than what my circumstances suggested. I owe you my career. How can I help you?" And just like that, the tears came. Relief mixed with fear mixed with hope. I told her everything, my voice breaking multiple times. Rachel listened without interrupting, asking only occasional questions to clarify details. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Mrs. Chan," Rachel said, "finally, what you've described matches patterns we've been investigating for several weeks. We've been building a case against a financial fraud ring that specializes in exploiting family relationships to secure loans using elderly relatives' assets. Your son's name has come up multiple times in our investigation." The words hit me like a physical blow. Marcus wasn't just stealing from me. He was part of something larger, something organized, something that hurt other people beyond just his own mother. "I need you to do exactly what I tell you," Rachel continued. "Don't confront Marcus yet. Don't let him know you're aware of any of this. Gather every financial document you have. Bank statements, investment records, property deeds, loan papers, everything. I'm going to send someone to your house this evening to collect them and take your statement officially. Can you do that?" "Yes," I managed. "Good. Mrs. Chan, I need you to understand something. What Marcus has done, it's serious. Very serious. If you press charges, if you cooperate with our investigation, he's going to face criminal prosecution. He could go to prison. I need to know that you're prepared for that possibility." I thought about my son. About the little boy who used to climb into my lap and asked me to read just one more story. About the teenager who'd worked so hard to get into a good college. About the man who'd looked me in the eye and convinced me I was too impaired to drive safely while he was systematically stealing everything I owned. I'm prepared, I said quietly. Because this isn't just about me, is it? You said there were other victims, at least a dozen that we know of. All elderly, all family members of people in Marcus' business network. We believe they've defrauded vulnerable seniors out of more than $2 million over the past 3 years. $2 million. Other mothers and fathers and grandparents who trusted their families and been betrayed. The magnitude of it was staggering then. Yes, I said, my voice stronger now. I'll cooperate fully. Whatever you need from me, you'll have it. Thank you, Mrs. Chan and Dorothy. I promise you, we're going to make this right. You gave me a future when I was a scared kid who didn't think she had one. Now, I'm going to give you justice. After we hung up, Angela put her arm around my shoulders. You did the right thing. I know, I said, but knowing it was right didn't make it hurt any less. The investigator arrived at 7 that evening. His name was Thomas Williams, a patient man in his 50s who spent 3 hours going through my financial records with me. He was gentle when I had to admit I didn't understand some of the documents, kind when I broke down crying while explaining how Marcus had convinced me to give up driving. By the time he left with copies of everything, I was exhausted, but also strangely relieved. The truth was out now. Whatever came next, at least I wouldn't be carrying this burden alone. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about what Rachel had said about Marcus being part of a larger fraud ring. About other families destroyed by this kind of betrayal. About my grandsons growing up knowing their father was a criminal. About Jessica Marcus's wife who might be innocent or might be complicit. About the life I thought I had versus the reality I was now facing. By morning, I'd made my decision. Not just to cooperate with the investigation, but to see it through to the end. No matter how painful, no matter what it cost me emotionally, because this wasn't just about my car or my forged signature or my stolen independence, this was about right and wrong, about protecting other vulnerable people from the same predator who happened to share my DNA. Rachel called at 8 o'clock in the morning. Mrs. Chan, we're moving forward today. Based on the evidence you provided and what we've gathered from other sources, we have enough for arrest warrants. I wanted you to know before it happens. By this afternoon, Marcus and 3 of his business associates will be in custody. My coffee cup trembled in my hand so fast. We've been building this case for months. Your testimony and documentation were the final pieces we needed. Mrs. Chan, I also want you to know that we're prepared for this to be difficult for you. Having your son arrested is traumatic. We can arrange for counseling services if you need them. What I need, I said slowly, is to know that other people won't be hurt by him. That's what matters. You're very brave. I'm very angry. I corrected. There's a difference. Rachel laughed softly. Sometimes anger is what gives us courage. Mrs. Chan, there's one more thing. Would you be willing to be present when we make the arrest? You don't have to be, but sometimes it helps victims to see justice happening in real time. I thought about Marcus's face when he realized his mother had been the one to bring his crimes to light. Part of me recoiled from the idea, but a larger part, the part that had spent 6 weeks feeling helpless and trapped and diminished, wanted to be there. Wanted him to see that underestimating me had been his biggest mistake. Yes, I said, I'll be there. Where and when? Marcus's office at 2 this afternoon. I'll send a car for you at 1:30. The next few hours passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. I changed clothes 3 times, unable to decide what one wears to watch their only child be arrested. I finally settled on the blue dress I'd worn to David's funeral because it made me feel strong, armored somehow. At 1:25, a black sedan pulled up in front of my house. The driver introduced himself as Agent Martinez, and he drove in silence to downtown to the glass tower where Marcus' financial consulting firm occupied the 14th floor. Rachel was waiting in the lobby, dressed in a sharp navy suit that made her look every inch the federal prosecutor she'd become. Mrs. Chan, she said, taking my hands, are you sure about this? You can still wait in the car if you prefer. I'm sure. We rode the elevator up in silence. Rachel had 3 other agents with her, all wearing the same serious professional expressions when the doors opened on the 14th floor. I could see Marcus through the glass walls of his corner office. He was on the phone laughing at something, completely unaware that his world was about to end. Rachel walked in first, her badge held high. Marcus Trenchon. I'm Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Rodriguez. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit financial fraud. The color drained from Marcus' face. His phone clattered onto his desk. That's when he saw me standing behind Rachel, and his expression shifted from shock to horror to rage in the span of seconds. Mom, what are you doing here? What is this? This is what happens when you steal from your own mother, I said quietly. When you forge her signature, when you use her trust as a weapon. Marcus looked at me like I'd slapped him. His mouth opened and closed several times before any words came out. And when they did, they were desperate and pleading in a way that might have moved me if I hadn't spent the last 12 hours learning the full extent of his betrayal. You don't understand, he said, his voice rising as 2 agents moved to either side of him. Mom, this is all a misunderstanding. I was protecting your assets. The loans were strategic investments. I was going to pay everything back. Rachel stepped forward, her voice cool and professional. Mr. Chan, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Do you understand these rights as I've explained them to you? But Marcus wasn't listening to her. His eyes were locked on mine, and I could see the moment when his strategy shifted from denial to manipulation. Mom, please think about the boys. Think about what this will do to your grandsons. You're going to destroy their lives because of some paperwork confusion because I made a few mistakes trying to help you. The mention of my grandsons, 8-year-old Christopher and 6-year-old Daniel, sent a sharp pain through my chest. I love those boys more than almost anything. The thought of them growing up knowing their father was in prison because of their grandmother's testimony made me feel physically ill. But then I thought about the other victims Rachel had mentioned. Other grandparents who loved their grandchildren just as much as I loved mine. Other families destroyed by Marcus's greed. Those weren't mistakes, I said. My voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. Those were crimes. And I'm not destroying your sons' lives. You did that all by yourself when you chose to steal from vulnerable people who trusted you. Marcus' face twisted with fury. You sanctimonious hypocrite. You think you're so perfect, don't you? The devoted mother, the selfless librarian, the helpful neighbor. Do you know what it was like growing up with you? Always so disappointed when I didn't live up to your impossibly high standards. Always comparing me to other kids, other families. I built everything I have despite you, not because of you. The words were designed to hurt, and they succeeded. But they also revealed something I'd suspected for years, but never wanted to acknowledge. My son resented me, not just for this moment, but for everything. For every sacrifice I'd made that he'd seen as pressure. For every expectation I'd had that he'd interpreted as criticism. For every moment of my love that he'd twisted into something toxic in his own mind. Agent Martinez stepped forward with handcuffs. Mr. Chan, we need you to come with us now. What followed was chaotic and humiliating in equal measure. Marcus was led out of his office in handcuffs while his colleagues watched through glass walls. Some looked shocked. Others looked knowing as if they'd suspected something wasn't right about Marcus' sudden success and expensive lifestyle. His assistant, a young woman named Claire, actually looked relieved, which made me wonder what she'd witnessed or suspected during her time working for him. Rachel guided me to a conference room while the arrest was being processed. We sat across from each other at a large table, and she poured me water from a picture that had been left there. How are you holding up? She asked gently. I don't know. I admit it. Part of me feels vindicated, but another part feels like I just destroyed my family. Mrs. Chan, You didn't destroy anything. Marcus did that himself. What you did was stop him from destroying more families. Rachel pulled out a tablet and opened a file. I want to show you something, but I need to warn you first that it's going to be upsetting. She turned the tablet toward me. On the screen was a photograph of an elderly man, probably in his mid-70s, sitting in what looked like a small apartment. His face was gaunt, his clothes worn. The defeat in his eyes was palpable, even through the photograph. "This is Harold Winters," Rachel said quietly. "He's 76 years old. He worked as a mechanic for 40 years before retiring. He had a small pension, a paid-off house, and about $200,000 in savings that he'd planned to leave to his daughter. His nephew, one of Marcus' business partners, convinced him to invest in what he called a guaranteed return opportunity. Harold signed papers he didn't fully understand. Within 6 months, his savings were gone. His house had a new mortgage he didn't remember taking out, and he was facing bankruptcy. We found him living in a studio apartment, eating 1 meal a day to make his remaining money stretch. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. What happened to him? We're working to recover his assets, but the money was moved through so many shell companies that it's going to take time. Meanwhile, Harold lost his independence, his security, and his ability to help his daughter when she needed him. She has a mess and can't work. She was counting on that inheritance to pay for her care." Rachel swiped to another photo. "This is Margaret Suzuki, 72 years old, former teacher. Her son-in-law, another of Marcus' associates, used similar tactics. Margaret lost her retirement savings in her house. She's currently living with her daughter's family, and the stress of the situation contributed to a stroke she suffered 4 months ago." I whispered. "Please, I understand." But Rachel continued gently. "I need you to understand fully, Mrs. Chun. Not to hurt you, but to help you remember why what you're doing matters. Because in the coming weeks and months, Marcus is going to try every manipulation tactic he knows. He's going to make you feel guilty. He's going to try to make you the villain in this story. And I need you to be able to hold on to the truth of what he did." She swiped through several more photos. Each one showed another victim, another elderly person whose trust had been exploited, another family torn apart by greed. By the time she finished, I'd counted 12 different people whose lives Marcus and his associates had destroyed. "How much money total?" I asked quietly. "Just over $2.3 million. Some of it we can recover. Some of it is gone forever, spent on luxury cars and expensive vacations and keeping up appearances. The financial investigation is ongoing. And you said Marcus has been doing this for 3 years. As far as we can determine, yes, it started small. A loan here, a forged signature there, but the operation got more sophisticated and more brazen over time. Your case was actually one of the sloppiest, which is why it drew our attention. The forgeries on your car loan documents weren't as clean as some of the others. It's almost like he got overconfident or desperate," I said, thinking back to the past few months. "Has he been having financial troubles?" Rachel pulled up another file on her tablet. "Marcus has been living well beyond his legitimate income for at least 2 years. The expensive house, the private school tuition for your grandsons, the country club membership, the luxury cars. It all required money he didn't actually have. We believe he got involved with the fraud ring initially to cover his own financial problems, and then it became his primary source of income." The revelation left me reeling. Everything I thought I knew about my son's success had been a lie. The thriving consulting business, the lucrative contracts, the bright future he'd built. All of it was constructed on a foundation of elder abuse and fraud. "What about Jessica?" I asked. "Marcus's wife. Did she know?" "We're still investigating her involvement. She's being questioned separately right now. Based on the evidence we have, she either knew and was complicit or she deliberately turned a blind eye to where the money was coming from. Either way, she benefited from the proceeds of his crimes. And my grandsons, they're innocent children. We've already contacted child services to ensure they're being properly cared for during this process." If both parents end up facing charges, we'll work with extended family to find appropriate placement. I closed my eyes, imagining Christopher and Daniel's confusion and fear. They were too young to understand why their father wouldn't be coming home, too young to comprehend the magnitude of what he'd done. What would this do to them? How would they ever recover from learning their father was a criminal? Mrs. Chan, Rachel said gently, I know this is overwhelming, but I need to take your full statement now while everything is fresh. Can you walk me through everything that happened starting from when Marcus first suggested you stop driving? For the next 3 hours, I recounted every detail I could remember. Rachel recorded everything, occasionally asking questions to clarify timelines or specifics. She was particularly interested in the conversations where Marcus had convinced me to give up my car, the exact wording he'd used, the pressure tactics he'd employed. She explained that establishing a pattern of coercion and manipulation would be important for the prosecution. Did he ever explicitly threaten you? She asked at one point. No, not directly, but there was always an implication that if I didn't cooperate, I would be putting myself and others in danger. That I was being selfish by insisting on driving. That good mothers put their children's peace of mind above their own desires. Classic emotional manipulation. Rachel made notes. Did anyone else witness these conversations? Jessica was present for some of them. She would back up whatever Marcus said, reinforce his concerns about my driving. Looking back, I think they were working together to break down my resistance. What about the actual transfer of the car? How did that happen? Marcus came to my house on a Saturday morning. He said he'd take the car to get it serviced and detailed, that he'd handle everything so I wouldn't have to worry about it. I gave him the keys and the registration. He said he'd bring me copies of the service records, but he never did. When I asked about it a week later, he said he'd left them at his office and kept forgetting to bring them by. Then he said the car needed more work than expected, that it would be in the shop for a while. He kept giving me excuses why I couldn't have it back. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him. I corrected. There's a difference. Part of me suspected something wasn't right, but he's my son. I thought maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the medications I was taking really were affecting my judgment like he kept suggesting. That's gaslighting, Rachel said. Her voice hard. He systematically made you doubt your own perception so you'd be easier to manipulate. It's a form of psychological abuse. The word abuse hung in the air between us. I'd been abused by my own son, the man I carried in my body, nursed through childhood illnesses, supported through every challenge, and celebrated every achievement. He'd abused me, exploited me, stolen from me, and he'd done it all while making me believe he was protecting me. After we finished the statement, Rachel walked me down to the lobby where Agent Martinez was waiting to drive me home. Before I got in the car, she pulled me aside. Mrs. Chan, I need to prepare you for what comes next. This is going to get ugly. Marcus will make bail within the next day or two. He's going to come after you hard. He's going to try to convince you to recant your statement. He's going to tell you that you misunderstood what happened. He might even threaten you, though he'll be smart enough to do it in ways that aren't explicit threats. You need to be strong. I will be. I promised. And if he or anyone associated with him contacts you, you call me immediately. We can get a restraining order if necessary. Rachel handed me her business card with her personal cell phone number written on the back. Day or night, you call me. Understood. I clutched the card like a lifeline. Thank you, Rachel, for everything. I know you didn't have to take this case personally. Mrs. Chan, you gave me my future. You believed in me when no one else did. You showed me that someone from my neighborhood with my background could be more than what everyone expected. I became a prosecutor because of you. Because you taught me that education was power and justice was worth fighting for. This isn't me doing you a favor. This is me finally getting to pay back a debt I vowed for 20 years. The drive home was quiet. Agent Martinez tried to make small talk, but I was too exhausted to respond with more than monosyllables. When we pulled up in front of my house, I saw Angela waiting on my porch again. And I felt a rush of gratitude for this woman who'd stayed my friend, even when I'd been too buried in grief to be a good friend back. Angela helped me inside and made tea while I collapsed into my reading chair. The events of the day felt surreal, like something that had happened to someone else. But the folder of documents on my coffee table, the business card with Rachel's number in my purse, the ache in my chest where my relationship with my son used to be, they all proved it was real. He's been arrested, I told Angela. Marcus and 3 of his business partners. They're charging him with multiple counts of fraud and elder abuse. Angela sat down across from me, her face serious. How do you feel? Like I've lost my son. Like I've saved him. Like I've done the right thing and the worst thing all at once. We sat in silence for a while, drinking tea and watching the sun set through my living room window. Eventually, Angela spoke again. Rachel called me earlier. She told me about the other victims, about how bad it was. I nodded. There were photos, elderly people who lost everything. I couldn't look at them and not act, Angela. Even if it means losing Marcus forever. You haven't lost him, Angela said firmly. He lost himself years ago. You're just refusing to enable it anymore. The phone rang shrill and unexpected in the quiet room. I almost didn't answer it, but Angela nodded toward it encouragingly. It might be important. I picked up on the 4th ring. Hello, Mom. Jessica's voice was tight with barely controlled hysteria. What have you done? What have you done to our family? I didn't do anything to your family, Jessica. Marcus did it himself. You went to the police. You reported your own son. Do you have any idea what you've done? The boys are terrified. Christopher saw the police taking his father away in handcuffs. He's been crying for hours. Daniel won't stop asking when Daddy's coming home. How could you do this to them? The guilt hit me like a physical blow, but I forced myself to stay firm. How could I do this? Jessica, Marcus stole from me. He forged my signature. He used my car as collateral for a loan I knew nothing about. That's a crime. It was a misunderstanding, a business arrangement. You could have talked to him about it privately instead of humiliating him in front of his entire office, instead of destroying his career and his reputation. A business arrangement would have involved my consent and knowledge. What Marcus did was fraud. And Jessica, he didn't just do it to me. There are other victims. Elderly people who lost their life savings. People who trusted their family members and were betrayed. I don't care about other people. Jessica's voice rose to a near scream. I care about my husband and my children. You've destroyed our lives because you're a bitter old woman who can't stand to see her son succeed. Is that what you really think? That this is about bitterness or jealousy? What else could it be? Marcus was right about you. He said you'd always been controlling, always trying to make him feel guilty for being successful. I should have listened to him when he said we needed to keep our distance from you. The words stung, but they also clarified something for me. Jessica wasn't innocent in this. She might not have been the architect of the fraud, but she'd benefited from it knowingly. She'd helped Marcus gaslight me about the car. She'd supported his campaign to make me doubt my own competence. She'd been complicit in my abuse, even if she hadn't signed the forged documents herself, Jessica said quietly. I'm sorry you're going through this. I'm sorry the boys are scared and confused. But I will not apologize for reporting crimes to the authorities. What Marcus did was wrong, and you know it was wrong. If you're honest with yourself, you know exactly where the money for your lifestyle was coming from. Don't you dare judge me, she hissed. You don't know anything about our lives, about the pressures Marcus was under, about what it takes to maintain a certain standard of living in this community. Takes crime, apparently. It takes stealing from elderly people who trusted their family members. It takes forging signatures and lying to banks and exploiting vulnerability. Is that really the standard you want to maintain, Jessica? She hung up without answering. I sat there holding the phone, my hand shaking while Angela watched me with concern. That didn't sound good, Angela said carefully. It wasn't, but I expected it. Rachel warned me that Marcus would try to manipulate me. I suppose Jessica is doing it on his behalf now. Do you think she'll try to bring the children here? Use them to guilt you into recanting your statement? Probably. And it might work. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. God, Angela, what if I'm wrong about this? What if there was another way to handle it that wouldn't traumatize my grandsons? Dorothy, look at me. Angela leaned forward, her voice intense. Those boys are already traumatized. Not because of what you did, but because of what their father did. They're going to grow up and learn the truth someday. Would you rather they learn that their grandmother enabled their father's crimes, or that she stood up for what was right, even when it was hard? I want them to learn that their grandmother loved them enough to protect them from growing up thinking that stealing from vulnerable people is acceptable behavior. I said slowly. That sometimes love means holding people accountable. Exactly. And that's what you're doing. You're showing them what integrity looks like, even if they're too young to understand it right now. The evening passed in a blur of anxiety and exhaustion. Angela stayed with me until after midnight, helping me go through more of my financial documents to make sure there weren't any other loans or accounts I didn't know about. We found 2 more concerning items. A credit card in my name that I'd never opened with a balance of $15,000 and a home equity line of credit that had been taken out against my house without my knowledge. Each discovery felt like another betrayal. How long had Marcus been planning this? How many times had he sat at my kitchen table, smiled at me, told me he loved me, all while systematically stealing my identity and my assets? By the time Angela left, I had a stack of documents to give to Rachel in the morning. I tried to sleep but kept waking from nightmares where Marcus was a child again, looking at me with hurt and confusion, asking why I didn't love him anymore. In the dreams, I tried to explain that love and accountability weren't opposites, but he couldn't hear me or wouldn't hear me. The distinction blurred. I woke at 6 o'clock to find 3 missed calls on my phone, all from numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't call back, suspecting they were from Marcus or Jessica using someone else's phone to get around my screening. Instead, I called Rachel. She answered on the second ring despite the early hour. Mrs. Chan, are you all right? I found more fraudulent accounts last night. A credit card and a home equity line. I don't know how deep this goes. I need you to bring me everything you found. Can you come to my office this morning? Say 9 o'clock. I'll be there. Rachel, there's something else. Jessica called last night. She was angry, threatening almost. What exactly did she say? I recounted the conversation as accurately as I could remember. Rachel was quiet for a moment after I finished. Mrs. Chan, I'm going to be blunt with you. Jessica is dangerous right now. She's facing the potential loss of everything. Her husband, her lifestyle, her social standing. People in that position sometimes do desperate things. I want you to be very careful. Don't open your door to anyone you don't know. Don't meet with Marcus or Jessica alone. If they show up at your house, call the police immediately. You think they might try to hurt me? I think they might try to intimidate you into changing your story. Whether that would involve physical threats or just emotional manipulation, I can't say, but I'm not taking chances with your safety. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet house and realized how isolated I'd become. When David was alive, we'd had friends, social activities, a full life. After he died, I'd withdrawn into my grief and let those connections fade. My world had shrunk to just my family. And now that family had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. If it weren't for Angela and Rachel, I would be completely alone in this. The doorbell rang at 7:30, making me jump. I looked through the peephole and saw a delivery person in uniform holding a large bouquet of flowers. My first instinct was to refuse them, thinking they might be from Marcus, but the delivery person looked impatient, and I didn't want to cause a scene with a neighbor watching. I opened the door with the chains still latched. Yes. Delivery for Dorothy Chan. Can you sign here? Who sent them? The cards inside, ma'am. I just deliver them. Against my better judgment, I signed and took the flowers. They were beautiful, expensive-looking roses and lilies arranged in a crystal vase. I set them on my kitchen table and opened the small envelope tucked among the blooms. The card read, "Mom, please call me. We need to talk about this misunderstanding before it goes any further. I love you. Think of the boys, Marcus." I stared at the card, at his handwriting, at the casual way he called systematically defrauding me a misunderstanding. The manipulation was so transparent, it was almost insulting. Did he really think flowers and a guilt trip about my grandsons would make me forget everything I'd learned? I took a photo of the card and texted it to Rachel. She responded immediately, "Don't respond to him. Document everything he sends. This is evidence of witness tampering." The flowers sat on my kitchen table like an accusation while I got ready for my meeting with Rachel. I thought about throwing them away, but decided to keep them as evidence. Another piece of proof that Marcus was more concerned with protecting himself than with actually making amends for what he'd done. The drive to Rachel's office downtown took 40 minutes in morning traffic. I'd called a ride share despite the cost, not trusting myself to navigate the city streets while my mind was spinning with anxiety and fear. The driver tried to make conversation, but I pleaded a headache and he left me in peace. Rachel's office was in a federal building, all concrete and glass and security checkpoints. I had to go through metal detectors and show ID before I could even get to the elevators. The security guard who checked my purse was kind though, calling me ma'am and making sure I knew which floor to go to. Rachel met me in the reception area, looking professional and competent in another sharp suit. She guided me to her office, a space that was somehow both cramped and intimidating, filled with file cabinets and legal books and framed diplomas that testified to her accomplishments. "Tell me about the flowers," she said after we settled into chairs across from her desk. I showed her the photo I'd taken of Marcus's card. She studied it carefully, her expression hardening. "This is good for our case," she said. "Finally, it shows consciousness of guilt. If Marcus genuinely believed he'd done nothing wrong, he wouldn't be trying to manipulate you into not cooperating with the investigation. He'd be confident that the truth would exonerate him. It just makes me sad." I admitted that even now when he's facing consequences for what he did, his first instinct is manipulation rather than genuine remorse. That tells you everything you need to know about who he's become. Rachel pulled out a legal pad and pen. "Now, walk me through what you found last night." I showed her the documents Angela and I had discovered the unauthorized credit card with its $15,000 balance. The home equity line of credit for $50,000 that I know nothing about. Bank statement showing transfers from my savings account that I couldn't explain. Each piece of paper represented another violation, another betrayal. Rachel photographed everything with her phone, making notes as she worked. "How much do you think he's stolen from you? Total?" "I don't know. Between the car, the credit card, the home equity line, and the savings transfers, at least $100,000, maybe more. We're going to need a forensic accountant to trace all of this." Rachel made more notes. "Mrs. Chan, I need to tell you that Marcus made bail last night. $10,000 posted by Jessica's parents. So, he's out there right now." "Yes, with conditions. He's not supposed to contact you directly or come within 500 feet of your residence. The flowers technically violate that order, though he could claim he had them sent before the order was in place. If he contacts you again, we can have his bail revoked." The confrontation happened 3 weeks later on a gray November morning that matched my mood perfectly. Rachel had called the night before to tell me that Marcus' preliminary hearing was scheduled, and that she expected him to make one final attempt to get me to change my testimony before we went to court. She was right. I was in my garden trying to salvage the last of my autumn vegetables before the first hard frost when I heard a car pull into my driveway. I looked up to see Marcus getting out of a rental sedan. His face haggard and desperate in a way I'd never seen before. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and mounting panic. He stopped at the edge of my garden, keeping the court-mandated distance between us, but close enough that I could see the tremor in his hands. "Mom, please, just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I stood slowly, my knees protesting after an hour of kneeling in the dirt. You're violating the restraining order just by being here, Marcus. I don't care. I need you to understand what you're doing to my family, to your grandsons. Christopher had a breakdown at school yesterday. He's seeing a therapist now because his grandmother decided to destroy his father's life over a misunderstanding. Stop calling it a misunderstanding. I pulled off my gardening gloves, meeting his eyes directly. You committed fraud. You stole from me and from 11 other elderly people. You forged signatures and manipulated vulnerable people who trusted you. I was trying to provide for my family. The consulting business wasn't bringing in enough money. Jessica had expectations. The boys needed private school. We had a lifestyle to maintain. I made some bad decisions. Yes, but I was going to fix everything. I just needed more time by stealing more from more victims. I shook my head. Marcus, do you even hear yourself? You're not taking responsibility for what you did. You're making excuses and blaming everyone else. Your wife, your circumstances, even me for reporting your crimes because you could have come to me first. We could have worked this out as a family. Instead, you went to the police and humiliated me in front of everyone I know. My career is destroyed. My marriage is falling apart. My children are traumatized. All because you couldn't forgive a few mistakes. Mistakes are accidental. What you did was deliberate and sustained over years. And Marcus, you didn't just betray me. You systematically gaslit me about my own competence. You made me think I was losing my mind, that I was too impaired to manage my own life. That's not a mistake. That's abuse. He flinched at the word as if I'd struck him. I never abused you. I was trying to protect you by stealing my car and using it as loan collateral. By forging my signature on documents. By draining my accounts and taking out credit in my name. That's protection. The money from those accounts was just sitting there. You weren't using it. I had opportunities, investments that could have doubled or tripled what you had. I was trying to help you grow your assets without my knowledge or consent. That's theft, Marcus. No matter how you try to reframe it. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration I remembered from his childhood. Fine. You want me to say it? I made mistakes. I did things I shouldn't have done. But Mom, I'm your son. Doesn't that count for anything? Don't I deserve a second chance? You do deserve a second chance, I said quietly. After you face the consequences of your actions, after you make genuine amends to the people you hurt, after you prove that you understand why what you did was wrong. But Marcus, you're not there yet. You're still focused on avoiding punishment rather than accepting responsibility. If you testify against me, I'm going to prison. Rachel made that very clear. Is that what you want? Your son in prison. What I want is for you to stop hurting people. If prison is what it takes for that to happen, then yes, I'll testify because this isn't just about you and me anymore. There's an elderly man who can't afford his medications because you stole his savings. There's a woman who had a stroke from the stress of losing her home. There are children besides Christopher and Daniel who are suffering because their parents or grandparents were victimized by you and your associates. Marcus' face hardened. So I'm supposed to be the sacrifice. The example you make to feel good about yourself. You're supposed to be accountable. That's what I taught you as a child, Marcus. Actions have consequences. You make a mess, you clean it up. You hurt someone, you make it right. When did you forget those lessons? When I realized the real world doesn't work that way. When I saw people getting ahead by cutting corners and bending rules while the honest ones struggled. When I understood that success requires doing whatever it takes. Not whatever it takes. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. Not if it means destroying other people's lives. Not if it means abandoning your integrity. Your father and I didn't raise you to be this person. Dad would have understood. Marcus's voice was bitter now. He cut corners, too. He made deals that weren't entirely legal. He just never got caught. That's not true. Your father was honest in his business dealings. He worked hard and played by the rules. You really believe that? Marcus laughed harshly. Mom, Dad's construction company only survived because he paid workers under the table and falsified tax documents. He bribed building inspectors and inflated insurance claims. He just made sure you never knew about it because you were too naive to handle the truth. The accusation hit me like cold water. Stop it. Don't you dare rewrite history to justify what you've done. I'm not rewriting anything. I'm telling you the truth. You were too willfully blind to see. Dad taught me everything I know about how business really works. The only difference is I got caught and he didn't. I stared at my son, at this stranger wearing Marcus's face, and realized that nothing I said was going to reach him. He'd constructed an entire worldview that justified his actions, that blamed everyone else for his choices, that painted himself as a victim of circumstances rather than the architect of his own downfall. You need to leave now, I said quietly, before I call the police and have you arrested for violating the restraining order. Fine, I'm leaving. But Mom, understand this. When you testify against me, when you help send me to prison, you're choosing strangers over your own family. You're choosing your pride over your grandson's well-being. That's something you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. He walked back to his car and I watched him drive away with a strange sense of finality. This was it. The last conversation I would have with my son as a free man. The moment when whatever remained of our relationship finally died completely. I went inside and called Rachel. She arrived within 20 minutes with 2 agents and I gave a statement about Marcus's visit. They photographed the tire tracks in my driveway, documented the exact time and nature of the conversation, added it all to the growing file of evidence against him. That was brave, Rachel said after the agents left. I know that couldn't have been easy. It was necessary. I sat down heavily in my reading chair. Rachel, he said something about David, my husband, about him being dishonest in his business practices. Is there any truth to that? Rachel was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Chan, I looked into your husband's business history when I started investigating Marcus. There were some irregularities in the early years of his construction company. Nothing that rose to the level of what Marcus did, but your husband wasn't entirely clean either. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me as much as it did. I'd been married to David for 40 years. Surely, I should have known if he was doing something illegal. But then again, I'd been Marcus's mother for his entire life, and I hadn't seen what he was becoming either. Maybe I'd been willfully blind in both cases, seeing what I wanted to see rather than what was really there. Does that make me a hypocrite? I asked quietly, turning in Marcus for crimes when his father did similar things. No, because you're not turning Marcus in to punish him. You're doing it to stop him from hurting more people, and you didn't know about your husband's activities. You're not responsible for things you had no knowledge of or control over. But I should have known about both of them. Rachel sat down across from me. Mrs. Chan, you're a good person who trusted the people you loved. That's not a character flaw. That's human nature. The flaw lies with the people who exploited that trust, not with you for having it. The preliminary hearing happened 2 weeks later. I sat in the courtroom, my hands folded in my lap, while Rachel presented the evidence against Marcus and his 3 co-conspirators. The prosecutor's case was devastating in its thoroughness. Bank records, forged documents, victim testimony, expert analysis of the fraud scheme. By the end of the day, even Marcus's expensive lawyer looked defeated. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the witness stand on trembling legs. I looked at Marcus sitting at the defense table. And for just a moment, I saw the little boy he used to be. The child who'd climbed trees and scraped his knees and run to me for comfort. Then I looked at the victim sitting in the gallery. At Harold Winters, who'd lost his life savings. At Margaret Suzuki, still recovering from her stroke. At the others whose lives had been destroyed by my son's greed. I told the truth, all of it. The way Marcus had manipulated me into giving up my car, the forged signatures, the stolen assets, the gaslighting and emotional abuse. I didn't embellish or exaggerate. I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. Marcus's lawyer tried to shake my testimony on cross-examination, suggesting I was confused or mistaken, that my age and medications might be affecting my memory. But I prepared for this with Rachel. I had documents, dates, times. I had the truth on my side, and truth doesn't need to be propped up with manipulation. The judge ruled that there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. Marcus' bail was revoked after the prosecutor presented evidence of his attempt to contact me in violation of the restraining order. I watched two marshals lead him away in handcuffs, watched Jessica sobbing in the gallery, watched my grandson sitting with Jessica's parents looking confused and frightened. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. It was also the rightest thing I'd ever done. The trial itself took 3 weeks. Marcus and his co-conspirators were found guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Marcus to 8 years in federal prison followed by 5 years of probation. He was ordered to pay full restitution to all victims. Though Rachel warned me that actually recovering the money would be a long and difficult process. I sat in the courtroom for the sentencing, listening to Marcus's final statement where he apologized to everyone except the people he'd actually hurt. He talked about his children, his mistakes, his intentions to do better. But he never once acknowledged the real harm he'd caused or took genuine responsibility for his choices. After the sentencing, Rachel walked me out of the courthouse. The media was waiting, cameras and microphones everywhere. They'd been following the case closely because of the high-profile nature of the fraud ring. Rachel had warned me they'd want a statement. I stopped on the courthouse steps and faced the cameras. "My name is Dorothy Chan," I said, my voice steady. "I'm 68 years old and I reported my own son to the authorities for defrauding me and 11 other elderly victims. I didn't do this because I'm vindictive or cruel. I did it because no one should be above accountability, not even family, especially not family. If sharing my story helps even one person recognize the signs of financial exploitation and have the courage to report it, then everything I've been through will have been worth it." The reporter shouted questions, but Rachel guided me to a waiting car. We drove in silence for several minutes before I finally spoke. Did I do the right thing? Yes. Rachel's answer was immediate and certain. You absolutely did. Then why do I feel so empty? Because love and justice sometimes require us to do hard things. Because holding people accountable doesn't erase the pain of their betrayal. Because you're grieving the son you thought you had while accepting the reality of who he actually became. 6 months have passed since Marcus's sentencing. I've started volunteering at the library again, leading a book club for seniors. I've joined a support group for victims of financial exploitation where I help others navigate the confusing process of reporting family fraud. I've even started those watercolor classes I always talked about, though my paintings are terrible and probably always will be. Angela and I have grown closer through all of this. Rachel stops by for dinner once a month, and we talk about everything except the case. I'm rebuilding a life that's mine on my terms without anyone telling me I'm too old or too impaired to manage my own affairs. Christopher and Daniel write me letters sometimes, supervised by Jessica's parents, who have custody, while Jessica awaits her own trial for money laundering. The boys' words are carefully neutral, clearly edited by adults, but I can read the confusion and hurt between the lines. Someday when they're older, I'll explain everything to them. I'll tell them that I loved their father enough to stop him from destroying more lives. I'll hope they understand. My car was returned to me after being held as evidence. I drove it home from the impound lot, my hand steady on the wheel, my mind clear. I've been right all along. There was nothing wrong with my driving. The only impairment I'd suffered was trusting someone who didn't deserve it. Now, when I drive through town, running my errands at my own pace on my own schedule, I sometimes think about Marcus in prison. I hope he's using this time to genuinely reflect on who he became and why. I hope he's getting the therapy and support. He needs to understand that love without integrity is worthless. I hope someday he'll be capable of real remorse instead of just regret at getting caught. But mostly I think about moving forward. About the life I'm building at 68 that's fuller and freer than the one I had before. About the strength I discovered in myself when I stood up to someone I loved and demanded accountability. About the hope that maybe my story will help others find that same strength when they need it. Justice isn't always satisfying. Sometimes it's just necessary. And sometimes doing the right thing means accepting that the people we love most are capable of causing the deepest harm. But we survive it. We rebuild. We keep going. And we never ever let anyone make us doubt our own worth again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them.